The blue and green planet hung in space like a jewel. Commander Vexithara watched it through the main screen of her ship. Her forearms moved across the control panels as she prepared for the final attack. Earth looked so peaceful from up here. It would not be peaceful much longer. All ships begin the assault, she ordered. Hundreds of alien ships moved toward Earth, their weapons charged with deadly energy. The humans had tried to fight back for 3 days. Their primitive rockets and nuclear bombs barely scratched the alien shields. It was almost sad how weak they were. Captain Hyunwoo Park sat in his fighter plane watching the alien ships fill the sky. His radio crackled with desperate voices from other human pilots. They were losing badly. The aliens had better weapons, better shields, and more ships than Earth could ever hope to match. All units fall back to base, he ordered into his radio. His voice was calm even though his heart was racing. We cannot win this fight. The aliens landed in every major city on Earth. Their soldiers marched through the streets with weapons that could melt steel. People ran and screamed, but there was nowhere to go. The aliens had surrounded the whole planet. Hyunwoo crashed his damaged plane near Seoul. He stumbled out and saw alien soldiers rounding up civilians. Men, women, and children were being loaded into large metal cages. The aliens worked with cold efficiency, like farmers collecting livestock. A young woman in a torn military uniform ran toward him. Lieutenant So-young Kim had been fighting in the city when the aliens broke through. Her rifle was empty and her face was covered in dirt and blood. "Captain, what are our orders?" she asked. Hyunwoo looked at the burning city around them. Alien ships hovered overhead like metal vultures. "Surrender," he said quietly. "Save who we can." The aliens called themselves the Dominion. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and thousands of species. Humans were just the latest addition to their vast empire. Commander Vexithara had studied the reports about Earth before the invasion. Humans seemed typical for a primitive species. They fought each other more than they worked together. They had barely reached their own moon. The conquest of Earth took exactly 72 hours. It was one of the fastest victories in Dominion history. Most species took weeks or months to fully defeat. Humans had fallen in 3 days. Vexithara walked through a human detention center outside what used to be called New York. Thousands of humans sat in metal cages, waiting to be shipped to other worlds. They would become workers in Dominion mines and factories. Some might even become soldiers for the Dominion army if they proved useful. "How many have we collected?" she asked her aide. "Nearly 8 billion, Commander. Every human settlement has been secured." Vexithara nodded. It was impressive work by her forces. Not a single major population center had escaped capture. The humans had no hidden colonies or secret bases. They had put all their people on one planet and made them easy to find. Dr. Minji Lee worked for the Dominion Science Division. She was not human, but she looked similar to them. Her people had been conquered by the Dominion 50 years ago. Now she served her new masters by studying other conquered species. She walked through the detention center with her scanning equipment. Her job was to check the health and mental state of the new prisoners. The Dominion needed to know if humans had any diseases or mental problems that might cause trouble later. Minji pointed her scanner at a group of human prisoners. The device beeped and showed readings on its small screen. Something was strange about these numbers. Human brain activity was much lower than it should be. She scanned more humans. The same result every time. Their brains were working at only 60% of normal capacity. It was as if something was holding back their mental functions. "Are you sick?" she asked one of the humans in broken English. The human, a middle-aged man with gray hair, looked up at her. "No, I feel fine," Minji frowned. The man seemed healthy, but his brain scan said otherwise. She made notes on her datapad. This was worth investigating further. Hyunwoo found himself in a different part of the detention center. The aliens had separated the military prisoners from the civilians. He sat on a metal bench with other soldiers and officers from around the world. None of them spoke much. What was there to say? So-young sat next to him, staring at the metal walls of their prison. "How long do you think they will keep us here?" "Not long," Hyunwoo replied. "They will move us to other worlds soon. We are more valuable as workers than as prisoners." A Russian colonel sitting across from them laughed bitterly. "Workers? We are slaves now. Our whole species are slaves." Hyunwoo did not argue. The man was right. Humanity had fallen from the rulers of their world to property of an alien empire in 3 days. It was hard to accept, but it was the truth. The aliens had been very careful during the invasion. They used weapons that stunned rather than killed when possible. They wanted to capture as many humans alive as they could. Dead humans were worthless. Living humans could work in alien mines and factories for decades. Vexthara reviewed the final reports from Earth. The planet was now empty of human life. Every person had been collected and prepared for transport to work camps across the galaxy. Earth itself would be turned into a supply depot for the Dominion fleet. She felt satisfied with the operation. Her forces had performed perfectly. The humans had offered no real resistance after the first day. They were a peaceful species that had never faced a real war. Their small conflicts with each other barely counted as battles. The Dominion had a simple process for dealing with new conquests. First, they would break the spirit of the conquered people with overwhelming force. Then they would separate families and communities to prevent organized resistance. Finally, they would use neural treatments to make the prisoners more cooperative and less likely to cause trouble. The neural treatments were the key to Dominion success. They used special machines to adjust the brain chemistry of conquered species. The treatments removed aggressive impulses and made subjects more willing to follow orders. It was much more effective than chains or guards. Minji watched as the first groups of humans were prepared for neural treatment. The process was simple and painless. Humans were placed in special chambers where energy beams targeted specific parts of their brains. The treatment took only a few minutes and left no visible marks. She continued to monitor her scanner as the humans went through the process. The readings were very strange. Instead of the usual increase in cooperation hormones, the human brain activity decreased even further. It was as if the treatment was putting parts of their minds to sleep. "Doctor, is there a problem?" asked the technician running the treatment machines. Minji looked at her readings again. "No, continue the process. I am just recording data for my research." But privately, she was concerned. The neural treatments were having an unexpected effect on humans. Instead of making them more cooperative, it seemed to be shutting down parts of their minds completely. She had never seen anything like it in 50 years of studying conquered species. The transport ships began loading human prisoners for the journey to work camps. Each ship could carry 10,000 humans in stasis pods. The journey to the outer rim mining worlds would take several months. The humans would sleep through most of it. Hyunwoo was loaded onto a ship with So Young and several hundred other military prisoners. As the stasis pod closed over him, he looked through the small window at Earth growing smaller in the distance. His homeworld was now just a blue dot among the stars. The last thing he saw before the sleeping gas took effect was So Young in the pod next to him. She looked peaceful, almost like she was just taking a nap. He wondered if they would ever see Earth again. Commander Vexthara filed her final report on the conquest of Earth. Human species successfully integrated into Dominion workforce. No significant resistance encountered. Population fully compliant with neural conditioning protocols. Recommend standard assignment to mining and manufacturing duties. She had no way of knowing that her greatest victory would soon become the Dominion's worst nightmare. 3 years had passed since Earth fell to the Dominion. The human prisoners had been scattered across dozens of worlds, working in mines and factories like the millions of other slaves from conquered planets. Everything seemed normal in the Dominion Empire. Then the Voidborn returned. Commander Vexthara stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the emergency reports flood in from across the galaxy. World after world was going dark. Entire fleets were disappearing without sending so much as a distress signal. The enemy was unlike anything the Dominion had faced before. The Voidborn were ancient beings from the dark spaces between galaxies. They had attacked the Dominion once before, thousands of years ago, but had been driven back at great cost. Now they had returned with ships that seemed to break the laws of physics and weapons that could unmake matter itself. "Admiral, we have lost contact with the 7th Sector," reported her communications officer. "That is 12 star systems in the past week." Vexthara felt a chill run down her spine. The 7th Sector had been protected by 3 full battle fleets. If the Voidborn could destroy that much firepower so quickly, what hope did the rest of the Dominion have? On the mining world of Kepler 442b, Tae-min Choi swung his plasma cutter at another chunk of crystal ore. The work was hard and dangerous, but it kept him alive. Around him, thousands of other humans labored in the deep tunnels beneath the planet's surface. The guards were different lately. The reptilian sector warriors who watched over the human workers seemed nervous and angry. They barked orders more harshly and punished small mistakes with violence. Something was making them afraid. The war is going badly for them, whispered Yunjihan as she worked beside Taimin. She had been a military strategist on Earth before the conquest. Even here in the mines, she could read the signs of a losing army. Taimin nodded but said nothing. Speaking too much could get you beaten or worse, but he had noticed the changes too. Fewer supply ships were arriving. The guards were getting hungrier and more desperate. Whatever was happening out there in space, it was not going well for the Dominion. Dr. Minji Li had spent 3 years studying the human workers across 17 different worlds. Her research into their strange brain patterns had become an obsession. The neural treatments that worked perfectly on other species seemed to have unexpected effects on humans. She stood in her laboratory, looking at brain scans from human subjects across the galaxy. The patterns were changing. After 3 years of neural suppression, something in the human mind was starting to fight back. "Computer, show me the progression charts for human group Alpha," she said. The holographic display showed brain activity measurements over time. For the first 2 years, human neural activity had remained low and stable, but in recent months something was changing. Deep parts of the human brain that had been dormant were slowly becoming active again. Minji pulled up similar charts from other conquered species. None of them showed this pattern. Once treated with neural conditioning, most species remained compliant for life, but humans seemed to be adapting to the treatment somehow. She made notes on her data pad. This could be important. If humans were developing resistance to neural conditioning, they might become dangerous to the Dominion war effort. She would need to report this to her superiors. Hyunwoo worked in a weapons factory on Titan 7. His job was to assemble targeting computers for Dominion fighter craft. The irony was not lost on him. He was building weapons that would be used to kill other free species, just as they had been used to kill his own people. The factory was busy these days. New orders came in every week for more weapons, more ships, more ammunition. The Dominion was clearly fighting a major war somewhere, and they needed every weapon they could get. "Captain," So Young whispered, as she worked at the station next to his. She still used his military rank, even though they were both slaves now. "Did you hear about the incident in Section C yesterday?" Hyunwoo shook his head. Information was hard to come by in the factory. The guards did not like workers talking to each other. 3 humans attacked a sector supervisor, she continued quietly. They tore him apart with their bare hands. The guards had to use stun weapons to stop them. This was troubling news. Violence between workers and guards was rare. The neural treatments were supposed to make such things impossible. Humans should not be capable of that kind of aggression anymore. But lately Hyunwoo had been feeling strange himself. Sometimes at night he would have vivid dreams of battle and violence. He would wake up with his heart pounding and his hands clenched into fists. The dreams felt more real than his waking life in the factory. Chang Ho-yoon had been a peace negotiator on Earth. He had spent his career trying to prevent wars and solve conflicts through talking. Now he worked in the communications center of a Dominion military base, monitoring radio signals from across the galaxy. The job gave him access to information that other human slaves never saw. He knew about the Voidborn attacks. He knew about the ships and planets that were disappearing. He knew that the mighty Dominion Empire was losing badly. But something else was happening too. Chang Ho had been tracking unusual incidents involving human workers across the galaxy. Violence was increasing. Humans were becoming more aggressive and unpredictable. Some were even displaying combat skills that they should not possess. The most disturbing part was that Chang Ho felt it happening to himself too. The gentle diplomat who had once spent his days preventing conflicts now found himself fantasizing about violence. Sometimes he would catch himself planning how to kill the guards who watched over him. These thoughts should have horrified him. Instead, they felt strangely natural. Dr. Minji Li stood before the Dominion Science Council, presenting her findings about the human workers. The council members listened with growing concern as she explained the changes in human brain activity. "You are saying that the neural treatments are failing?" asked the lead counselor, a tall being with blue skin and multiple eyes. "Not failing exactly," Minji replied. "The treatments are working as designed, but humans seem to be adapting to them. Parts of their brains that we suppressed are becoming active again. In some cases, they are becoming more active than they were before treatment." The council members exchanged worried glances. This was not something they had encountered before in thousands of years of conquest. "What is your recommendation, doctor?" asked another counselor. Minji hesitated. Her research suggested something that seemed impossible. "I believe we need to study human brain structure more carefully. The neural pathways we have been suppressing may not be what we thought they were." "Explain." "We assumed we were suppressing aggressive and violent impulses in humans, just as we do with other species. But I now believe we may have been suppressing something else entirely, something that humans use to control their natural instincts." The implication of her words hung in the air like a poison cloud. If humans were naturally violent beings who used their higher brain functions to control that violence, then the neural treatments had been removing their self-control rather than their aggression. "Impossible," said the lead counselor. "No intelligent species would evolve with such dangerous natural instincts." But even as he spoke, reports were coming in from human work camps across the galaxy. Violence was spreading. Human workers were becoming unpredictable and dangerous. Some camps had to increase their guard presence just to maintain order. On Kepler 442b, Taman felt the change happening inside his mind like a dam breaking. Memories that were not his own flooded through his consciousness. Images of ancient battles, of humans fighting with stone tools against creatures that wanted to eat them. Millions of years of evolution on a world where everything wanted to kill them. Earth had not been a peaceful planet. It had been a death world where only the most violent and adaptable species could survive. Humans had not evolved to be peaceful. They had learned to be peaceful despite their nature, and now that learning was being stripped away, Yunji saw it happening to the other humans around her. Workers who had been quiet and obedient for 3 years were beginning to show signs of aggression. They moved differently, like predators stalking prey. Their eyes were becoming sharp and focused. The sector guards noticed it too. They began carrying more weapons and working in larger groups. But they did not understand what they were seeing. They thought the humans were becoming sick or mentally unstable. They had no idea that the humans were becoming healthy for the first time in 3 years. The truth was spreading through the human population like a virus. As the neural treatments lost their effectiveness, humans were remembering what they really were. Not the peaceful, civilized beings that the Dominion had conquered, but the apex predators of Earth. Dr. Minji Lee filed her final report with growing dread. Her research had revealed the truth about humanity, but it was too late to act on it. The process had already begun across the galaxy. Millions of humans were waking up from their enforced sleep, and when they fully awakened, the galaxy would learn what war really meant. The awakening began at exactly 1432, Galactic Standard Time across 17 worlds simultaneously. Later, no one could explain how millions of humans scattered across the galaxy all experienced the same moment of clarity at the same instant. It was as if some invisible signal had reached every human mind at once. Hyunwoo felt it first as a burning sensation behind his eyes. He was assembling a targeting computer when suddenly his hand stopped moving. Images flooded his mind, not memories of his own life, but deeper memories carved into his DNA over millions of years of evolution. He saw his ancestors hunting massive beasts with primitive spears. He felt the rush of adrenaline as early humans fought off predators in the African night. He experienced the joy of victory and the taste of enemy blood on his lips. These were not human memories. They were the memories of Earth itself, written into every cell of his body. Around him in the weapons factory, other humans were experiencing the same awakening. Workers dropped their tools and stood motionless as their suppressed instincts came flooding back. The sector guards noticed the change immediately. "What is wrong with the humans?" one guard asked another in their hissing language. Before anyone could answer, So Young moved. Her hand shot out and grabbed the nearest guard by the throat. The reptilian warrior was twice her size and heavily armed, but he went down like he had been struck by lightning. So Young's fingers found pressure points that no human should have known existed. The other guards reached for their weapons, but it was too late. Every human in the factory was moving now, and they moved like predators who had been caged for far too long. Yunwoo found himself holding a dead sector warrior, though he could not remember killing it. His hands were covered in alien blood, and instead of horror, he felt only satisfaction. This was right. This was what humans were meant to do. On Kepler 442b, Taman experienced the same awakening in the crystal mines. The neural dampeners that had kept his mind quiet for 3 years suddenly felt like cotton being pulled from his ears. Every sound became sharper, every smell more distinct. His muscles felt stronger and his reflexes faster. The Sektar mine supervisor was shouting orders when Taimin grabbed him. The alien warrior tried to draw his weapon, but Taimin's hands moved faster than thought. He drove his fingers into the creature's throat and felt the satisfying crunch of cartilage breaking. Yunji was there beside him, moving with the same deadly precision. Her strategic mind, now freed from artificial constraints, saw the mine layout with perfect clarity. She knew exactly where the guards were positioned, where the weapons were stored, and how to take control of the entire facility. Section leaders, take the armory, she called out in a voice that carried absolute authority. Mining crews, secure the transport bay. Communications team, cut off all outside signals. The humans moved like a single organism. 3 years of forced labor had made them familiar with every inch of the mining complex. Now they used that knowledge to devastating effect. The Sektar guards, trained for warfare across 100 campaigns, found themselves outfought by slaves who had been digging rocks just minutes before. Dr. Minji Lee watched the security feeds from her laboratory with growing horror. On every screen, human workers were overwhelming their guards with savage efficiency. The violence was not random or chaotic. It was perfectly coordinated, as if the humans had been planning this moment for years. But that was impossible. The neural treatments prevented complex planning and coordination. Humans should not be capable of this level of organization. She pulled up the real-time brain scans from the human population. What she saw made her blood run cold. Human neural activity was not just returning to normal levels. It was exceeding anything in her records. Parts of the human brain that had been dormant were now blazing with activity. Computer, analyze current human brain patterns against baseline Earth data, she commanded. The results appeared on her screen a moment later. According to the analysis, the humans were now operating at 150% of their pre-conquest neural capacity. The neural treatments had not just suppressed their higher functions, they had created pressure that was now being released all at once. Minji reached for her communication device to warn the Dominion command, but an alarm started blaring before she could send the message. The human workers in her own facility had begun their revolt. Chang-ho moved through the communications center like death itself. The diplomat who had once negotiated peace treaties was now calculating the most efficient way to kill every guard in the building. His hands found weapons he had never trained with, but somehow knew how to use perfectly. The Dominion soldiers fired their stun weapons, but the humans absorbed the energy blasts and kept coming. The neural treatments that had made them compliant had also made them resistant to the Dominion's non-lethal weapons. Their nervous systems had adapted to energy-based suppression. Within minutes, Chang-ho and his team had control of the communication arrays. His diplomatic training, now freed from moral constraints, allowed him to forge command codes and broadcast false orders across the sector. Dominion response fleets received orders to stand down. Reinforcements were redirected to empty space. The humans were not just rebelling, they were fighting with the accumulated knowledge of an entire species. Every skill that had ever existed on Earth was somehow accessible to them now. Soldiers knew strategy they had never learned. Workers understood weapons they had never seen. Scientists grasped technologies that should have been beyond their comprehension. Across 17 worlds, the pattern repeated itself. Human slaves rose up against their captors with overwhelming force and perfect coordination. The Dominion forces, caught completely off guard, were slaughtered or driven off their own planets within hours. Vexthera received the first reports while fighting a desperate battle against void-born forces in the Centauri sector. At first, she dismissed them as impossible. 17 worlds could not simultaneously experience total communication blackout. Her officers had to be mistaken. Then the human fleets arrived. The ships were crude modifications of captured Dominion vessels, but they moved with deadly purpose. Their formations were perfect, their tactics flawless, and their intent absolutely clear. They had not come to negotiate or to make demands. They had come to kill every Dominion citizen they could find. Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of what had once been the Dominion cruiser Eternal Victory. The ship had been renamed Earth's Fury, and its systems had been modified by humans who somehow understood alien technology better than its builders. His transformation was complete now. The peaceful starfighter pilot who had surrendered to save civilian lives was gone. In his place stood something that had existed in human DNA for millions of years, a predator perfectly adapted for warfare. "Admiral, we have Dominion fleet signatures incoming," So Young reported from the tactical station. Her title was honorary. The humans had no formal military structure anymore. They functioned as a pack, with the strongest and most skilled taking leadership naturally. "Composition?" Yanwu asked. 12 heavy cruisers, 4 battleships, and a carrier group. "They are requesting communication," Hyunwoo almost laughed. The Dominion still believed this was a conventional rebellion that could be resolved through negotiation. They had no idea what they were facing. "No response," he ordered. "All ships attack formation. No survivors." The human fleet moved like a school of predatory fish. Each ship knew exactly what the others would do without any communication. They had become something more than individual humans. They were humanity itself, expressed through steel and energy weapons. The Dominion fleet tried to fight according to their military doctrine. They attempted to disable rather than destroy, hoping to recapture the rebel ships. They broadcast surrender demands and offered terms for negotiation. The humans offered no such courtesy. Every attack was aimed to kill. Every tactic was designed for total destruction. They fought not like civilized beings, but like the apex predators of a death world that had survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, and asteroid impacts. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the human fleet was damaged but intact. The Dominion fleet was gone. Not captured, not disabled, but completely destroyed. No survivors, no prisoners, no mercy. Dr. Minji Lee found herself aboard a refugee ship, fleeing the systematic destruction of her people. Around her, other Dominion citizens huddled in fear as reports came in from across the galaxy. The humans were not content to free themselves. They were hunting down every Dominion citizen they could find. She transmitted her final research report to whatever remained of Dominion High Command. The neural treatments did not suppress human aggression. They suppressed human conscience. We removed their ability to feel mercy and gave them cause for revenge. The humans do not fight like soldiers. They fight like their planet, ruthless, adaptive, and completely without restraint. The message was broadcast across Dominion space as a warning. Humanity was no longer the peaceful species they had conquered. They had become something else entirely. Something that viewed the entire galaxy as prey. And they were just getting started. The human war machine spread across the galaxy like a plague. Within 6 months of their awakening, they had claimed over 50 star systems and destroyed countless Dominion fleets. But their true enemy was not the crumbling empire they had once served. It was the ancient darkness that watched from the void between stars. The Voidborn had been monitoring the conflict with growing interest. These newcomers fought with a savagery that reminded them of species they had faced eons ago, back when the universe was young and violent. Most civilizations eventually chose peace over war, making them easy to defeat. But these humans seemed to have chosen something else entirely. On the bridge of his flagship, Hyunwoo studied reports from across human-controlled space. Every world they liberated was being transformed into a fortress. Every captured ship was being rebuilt into a more deadly weapon. The humans were not interested in governing an empire. They were preparing for the real war that was coming. "Admiral," So Young called from her station, "we are receiving a transmission from the Outer Rim." "It is not from Dominion forces." Hyunwoo felt a chill run down his spine. The humans had been expecting this moment. Their awakened instincts told them that something much more dangerous than the Dominion existed in the dark spaces between galaxies. "Put it through," he ordered. The main screen flickered and filled with an image that hurt to look at directly. The Voidborn emissary was a creature of living darkness, its form shifting and changing like black smoke. When it spoke, reality itself seemed to bend around its words. "Greetings, young species." The entity communicated through waves of psychic energy. "We have watched your recent activities with interest. You fight well for such primitive creatures." Yunwoo felt his awakened mind processing the alien communication with perfect clarity. This was not a negotiation, it was a warning. The Voidborn were announcing their presence before they began the real slaughter. "We do not seek your approval," Yunwoo replied calmly. The creature that might have been laughing, though the sound was like the screaming of dying stars. Bold words from a species that has barely left its birth world. "Do you know what we are, little human? You are the enemy." Hyun-woo said simply. The void-born entity studied him with interest that was older than human civilization. Indeed. And soon you will learn what that means. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Around him, Hyun-woo could feel the tension from his crew. They all understood what was coming. The real war was about to begin. Chang-ho worked from the former Dominion capital, coordinating human forces across the galaxy. His diplomatic skills had been transformed into something far more useful: the ability to organize total war on a galactic scale. Every human settlement was now a military base. Every captured factory was producing weapons. The transformation was remarkable to observe. Humans who had been miners and factory workers just months ago were now operating complex military equipment with perfect skill. It was as if the knowledge had always been there, waiting to be unlocked. "Sir," reported one of his aides, "the Outer Rim colonies are requesting additional heavy weapons. They expect void-born contact within the week." Chang-ho nodded and marked the request on his tactical display. The humans had learned everything they could about their new enemy from captured Dominion records. The void-born fought with weapons that could unmake matter itself. Traditional shields and armor were useless against them, but humans had advantages that the Dominion had never possessed. They were not bound by concepts of civilized warfare. They had no interest in preserving enemy lives or limiting collateral damage. And most importantly, they had something that the ancient void-born had long forgotten: the ability to choose death over defeat. Yoonji commanded the defense of the Kepler system, where humanity's first rebellion had begun. The mining world was now a fortress bristling with weapons taken from a dozen different alien technologies. But she knew it would not be enough against the void-born. "General," one of her officers reported, "long-range sensors are detecting spatial distortions at the edge of the system. The enemy is coming." Yoonji studied the tactical display with the cold precision of a predator. The void-born ships were unlike anything in the Dominion fleet. They seemed to exist partially outside normal space, phasing in and out of reality as they moved. "All units prepare for contact," she ordered. "Remember, and we are not fighting to win territory. We are fighting to hurt them as much as possible before we die." This was the human way of war. Every battle was fought with the assumption that death was inevitable. The only question was how much damage they could inflict on their enemies before the end. The void-born fleet materialized at the edge of the Kepler system like a nightmare made real. Their ships were geometric impossibilities that hurt to look at directly. Energy weapons that could erase matter from existence, charged with power drawn from dark dimensions. But the humans were ready for them. The first wave of human ships accelerated toward the enemy at maximum speed. These were not designed to survive the encounter. They were kinetic weapons, guided by human pilots who had chosen to die. In the most effective way possible, the void-born had technology that could stop most projectiles, but they had never faced an enemy that used their own ships as ammunition. The human vessels impacted at relativistic speeds, their modified engines detonating in fusion explosions that lit up the entire system. Yoonji watched the tactical display as the first exchange of fire began. Human weapons were primitive compared to void-born technology, but they were used with devastating creativity. Humans had learned to overload their own power systems and use them as bombs. They modified mining charges into planet killers. They turned everything into a weapon. The battle raged for 18 hours. By the end, the Kepler system was gone. Not just the human forces, but the planets themselves had been shattered by the violence of the combat. The void-born had won, but at a cost that shocked them. They had expected to face another civilized species that would surrender when defeat became inevitable. Instead, they had fought an enemy that became more dangerous as their situation became more hopeless. Taemin received the report from Kepler while commanding the defense fleet at Wolf 359. The entire system had been lost, but the humans had destroyed nearly a third of the attacking void-born force. It was the most successful defensive action against the ancient enemy in recorded history. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we are detecting similar spatial distortions." "They are coming here next," Taemin nodded grimly. The void-born were systematically attacking every major human stronghold, expecting each victory to break human morale. They did not understand that human morale actually increased with each defeat, as long as they inflicted casualties on their enemies. "Prepare the charges," he ordered. The humans had learned something important during their rebellion against the Dominion. Their enemies always underestimated them because they looked at human technology and human numbers instead of looking at human nature. The Voidborn made the same mistake. They saw a young species with primitive weapons fighting against ancient beings with reality-warping technology. They expected an easy victory followed by quick surrender. They had no idea that they were fighting a species that had evolved on a world where extinction events were common occurrences. Humans had survived ice ages by outlasting them. They had survived asteroid impacts by enduring them. They had survived supervolcanic eruptions by refusing to give up. The Voidborn had never faced an enemy that treated extinction as just another problem to solve. Dr. Min-ji. Lee watched the reports from her refugee ship with a mixture of horror and fascination. The humans were losing every major battle, but somehow they were winning the war. Each defeat cost the Voidborn more ships and more resources than they could afford to lose. "Doctor," asked one of her fellow refugees, "do you think the humans can actually defeat the Voidborn?" Min-ji considered the question carefully. The Voidborn were technologically superior in every way. They had weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics. They had existed since before most stars were born, but the humans had something that trumped all of those advantages. They had the ability to transform any situation into a weapon, including their own destruction. "I do not think they can defeat the Voidborn," she said finally, "but I think they can make the Voidborn regret ever finding them." Across the galaxy, human forces prepared for the final phase of their war. They had no illusions about their chances of survival, but they had awakened to something the universe had never seen before, a species that could be both perfectly civilized and absolutely savage, depending on what the situation required. The Voidborn were about to learn what happened when you threatened a species that had already chosen to die rather than submit. They were about to discover that humans could make even defeat into a victory, as long as their enemies suffered enough in the process. The final confrontation began in the ruins of what had once been the Dominion capital. Chang-ho stood in the center of the shattered city, waiting for the Voidborn delegation to arrive. Around him, the smoking wreckage of buildings stretched to the horizon, testament to months of brutal warfare. The humans had lost 60% of their forces in the campaign to reach this moment, but those losses had bought them something precious: the attention of the Voidborn High Command. The ancient beings had finally decided to treat humanity as a threat worth their personal attention. The air shimmered, and space itself seemed to bend as the Voidborn emissary materialized before him. The creature was even more terrible in person than it had appeared on the communication screens. It existed partially outside normal reality, its form shifting between dimensions that human eyes could barely perceive. "You have fought well for infants," the entity communicated through waves of psychic energy that made the ground tremble. "But this ends now. We offer you one chance to surrender with dignity." Chang-ho smiled, and the expression would have terrified the diplomat he had been before humanity's awakening. "You misunderstand our position. We are not here to surrender." The Voidborn entity paused, studying the human with interest that was older than Earth's sun. "Then why are you here, little creature?" "To show you what you really face," Chang-ho replied calmly. Across the galaxy, every human felt the signal simultaneously. It was not transmitted through any technology. It was carried in their awakened DNA, a call that reached every member of their species at the same instant. The final gambit was beginning. Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of Earth's Fury as the ship accelerated toward the Voidborn dreadnought. Around him, the bridge crew worked with the calm efficiency of people who had already accepted their deaths. This was not a battle they expected to survive. "Admiral," So Young reported, "all human fleets are in position. We have confirmation from every sector." Hyunwoo nodded. The humans had spent months preparing for this moment, gathering every ship they possessed into a coordinated strike across dozens of star systems. It would be the largest military operation in human history, and the last one most of them would ever see. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "Execute Protocol Omega." Protocol Omega was humanity's final strategic doctrine. It abandoned all concepts of military tradition, civilized warfare, and self-preservation. Every human ship, every human soldier, every human world would become a weapon aimed at a single target, making the Voidborn regret their existence. On the surface of Titan 7, Taemin watched as his engineers completed their work on the planet's core. The massive mining operation had been converted into something else entirely, a bomb large enough to crack a world in half. When it detonated, it would take out everything in the system, including the human forces stationed there. "Sir," one of his officers reported, "Void-born forces are entering the outer system. They will be in weapons range within the hour." Taemin checked his chronometer. The timing had to be perfect for Protocol Omega to work. Every human action across the galaxy was coordinated to happen at the same moment. "Begin the countdown," he ordered. The Void-born fleet approached Titan 7 with the confidence of beings who had conquered reality itself. Their weapons could unmake matter at the atomic level. Their shields could deflect the energy of dying stars. They had fought and defeated civilizations that humans could not even imagine. But they had never fought a species that turned everything, including their own extinction, into a tactical advantage. Yunji commanded the human forces on New Sol, the colony world that had become humanity's backup capital after Earth's capture. The planet was surrounded by void-born ships, completely cut off from any hope of rescue. By every measure of military strategy, her position was hopeless, which was exactly where humans fought best. "All units, prepare for surface bombardment," she ordered. "Remember, we are not trying to win. We are trying to make them pay." The Void-born began their attack with weapons that could sterilize entire continents. Energy beams that operated outside normal physics carved through the planet's crust like knives through paper. But instead of finding cowering civilians, they found cities that had been converted into massive weapons platforms. Every building had been rigged with explosives. Every power plant had been overloaded to critical levels. Every human on the planet carried enough explosive material to level a city block. The Void-born were not attacking a colony. They were triggering a planet-sized bomb. Chang-Ho felt the psychic pressure from the Void-born emissary as the ancient being began to understand what was happening. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy as human forces executed their final strategy with perfect coordination. "Impossible," the entity communicated, its mental voice carrying notes of something that might have been fear. "You cannot be doing this. No species chooses extinction over surrender." "You still do not understand what we are," Chang-Ho replied. "We are not choosing extinction. We are choosing victory." The truth was spreading across void-born space like a virus of understanding. The humans were not fighting to preserve their civilization. They were fighting to destroy their enemies, even if it meant destroying themselves in the process. Every human world under attack was becoming a weapon. Every human ship was being used as a guided missile. Every human soldier was carrying enough explosive material to take out dozens of enemies when they died. The Void-born had technology that could defeat any weapon, but they had no defense against enemies who turned themselves into weapons. Protocol Omega reached its crescendo as human forces across 17 star systems detonated simultaneously. Planets cracked apart in fusion explosions. Stars destabilized as their cores were artificially triggered to go supernova. Space itself burned as humans used technologies they barely understood to inflict maximum damage on their enemies. The Void-born fleet found itself fighting not against military forces, but against the laws of physics themselves. Humans had learned to weaponize everything: gravity, time, the quantum foam that underlied reality itself. Dr. Minji Lee watched the destruction from her refugee ship at the edge of Void-born space. The energy signatures were visible even from thousands of light years away. Entire sectors of the galaxy were going dark as human forces turned them into massive weapons. "Doctor," asked her companion, "are the humans insane?" Minji considered the question as she watched stars die in the distance. "No," she said finally. "They are something worse. They are sane. This is what they evolved to do when extinction threatens their species. The Mo. Void-born had ruled the galaxy for millions of years because no intelligent species had ever been willing to pay the price necessary to defeat them. They had assumed that self-preservation was a universal, constant among thinking beings. Humanity had just proven them wrong. The Void-born entity studying Chang-Ho suddenly recoiled as the true scope of human strategy became clearer. The ancient being had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, but it had never encountered anything like this. "You are destroying yourselves to hurt us," it communicated with something approaching awe. "No," Chang-Ho corrected. We are destroying everything to hurt you, including you. The final phase of Protocol Omega began as human forces that had infiltrated void-borne space activated their last resort weapons. These were not bombs or energy weapons. They were humans themselves, modified with captured void-borne technology to exist partially outside normal space. When they detonated, they took pieces of reality with them. The void-borne discovered that their greatest strength, existing outside normal physics, had become a vulnerability. The human suicide weapons were designed to damage the dark dimensions where void-borne consciousness resided. For the first time in their ancient existence, the void-borne felt something they had not experienced in eons, the possibility of their own extinction. The entity facing Chang-Ho began to flicker, its form becoming unstable as the dimensional attacks reached even the command levels of void-borne hierarchy. "This is impossible," it communicated weakly. "We are eternal. We cannot be destroyed." Chang-Ho smiled as he felt the quantum charges in his own body beginning to activate. He was the final component of Protocol Omega, a weapon designed to take out the void-borne High Command itself. "Everything can be destroyed," he said calmly. "You just have to be willing to pay the price." The explosion that consumed Chang-Ho and the void-borne emissary lit up the dead capital city like a new sun, but its true effect was felt across dimensions, as the quantum cascade tore through void-borne space like a plague of non-existence. When the destruction finally ended, humanity was gone. Earth was a radioactive wasteland. Their colonies were shattered ruins. Their fleets were scattered debris floating in the void. But the void-borne were broken. Commander Vexithara, among the few Dominion survivors, received the final transmission from human space. It was broadcast on all frequencies, a message intended for any species that might be listening. To whoever finds this record, humanity is extinct. We chose this fate rather than submit to our enemies. We leave this message as a warning and a promise. The universe contains species that cannot be conquered because they refuse to be conquered. Remember us not as victims, but as the beings who taught two galactic empires that some prices are too high to pay.